Who makes the more reliable vehicle, Volkswagen or is it Mazda? Who's got the more reliable drivetrain? Who's got the more reliable car? Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. So why many Mazdas these days are built still in Japan, and some would argue that the Japanese built vehicles, same with Toyota, are the only vehicles you would probably want to buy from each brand. And while that's a good loose rule of thumb, that's not always entirely accurate. And while many Volkswagens are built in places like Mexico, as well as the Volkswagen Atlas like we're looking at right here, is built in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now these vehicles here are big, glorious, and many people were excited when Volkswagen created a full-size SUV that competed with the likes of Infiniti, Cadillac, Nissan, and even Chevy. But the truth is, the Volkswagen Atlas is just the end of the road right now, because Volkswagen has been creating small, cost-effective vehicles for many years. European vehicles, even the Taos is their lowest cost entry-level SUV in North America. Tiguan, another vehicle slightly larger. You could get the upgraded third row seat, but that's gone now here in 2025. As well as Volkswagen Jetta, the Golf, and beyond are many very popular models that people have been buying for years. There's a high number of enthusiast vehicles like the Golf R, the GTI, even the Scirocco from many years ago means that it's a popular brand. There must be a reason for its popularity. We'll talk about Volkswagen popularity in a second here. First, we're looking at the Mazda CX-5. This is one of the most popular SUVs on the market right now for Mazda. A lot of these on the road these days, and there's a good reason for it. Now, there's three distinctive engines that you're typically going to find in these Mazdas. You're going to find the base 2-liter engine, a 2.5-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, and you're also going to find a GT or a turbo version, a 2.5-liter turbo engine that gives you power well over 250 horsepower in a top trim level. But these vehicles are known for high levels of reliability, and many people are really touting the durability of the drivetrains that Mazda's been creating these days. That 2.5-liter, ultra reliable. They're also made it up to a 6-speed manual in a front-wheel drive Mazda 3, or pretty much default Mazda's offering up a 6-speed torque converter automatic transmission, which is actually a breath of fresh air when you consider most manufacturers with smaller vehicles like this these days are going with a CVT, which is not as known for the durability and reliability. Mazda is an up-and-comer these days, creating a lot of reliable products that are direct competition for the likes of Honda, who used to be the reigning king, and even Toyota, which many argue is still the most reliable brand on the planet. The latest hybrid version of the Mazda CX-5 is the exact same drivetrain that you'll find in the RAV4. And while Toyota is arguably one of the most reliable brands these days, unfortunately things have been changing. In 2024, 5, and now beyond, we're finding that Toyota's had their share of issues. Electrical gremlins, of course, with their V6 now, they aren't shy of problems. But if you've been following the critics and consumers reports, you'll find that Mazda's been snaking and laddering their way up to the top because of their durability, their reliability, their consistency, and the fact that they haven't changed their drivetrains all that much. When you even look at the styling, they're definitely coming up the ranks. Of course, they're doing things that make you go zoom zoom. Mazda here definitely have these great open grills, very unique, very distinctive. I love their headlights on some of their previous generation and even the latest generation. Of course, you get LEDs. You get a great looking style on the front end, and it's very distinctive, and it looks a little bit more unique than a lot of their competition. They're giving you some chrome updates. They're giving you some beautiful gunmetal gray alloys, fold away mirrors. In some cases you get sunroof, in other cases you don't. You get this beautiful Hofmeier's kink, and of course it's just a good looking vehicle. Are they a little compact and short on space? Yes, that's one of the few complaints. Here's a CX-5. They do give you all-wheel drive, pretty much almost standard, and the Skyactiv G means that you're going to get one of the most reliable 2.5-liter engines known to the industry today. Which car has more problems? Everything can fail. It doesn't matter how good or how bad the car brand is, but it's just the severity of failures that are really the more troubling question. And here we've got the Volkswagen Atlas, and we'll talk about some of the failures, but look, you get the LEDs. Of course, this is the R line, and some of these, of course, you can get the sleek back. You do get the lack of the third row, but the regular Atlas, you do get a third row. It's huge, immense inside, LED taillights. You get the hitch receiver for towing weight in this little Atlas. This is the older version of V6 because they no longer have the V6 available. 4Motion, yes, all-wheel drive, but the V6 is gone, and that's a big part of the problem. They've now replaced all of their Atlases with a turbocharged 2-liter 4-banger, which literally has no reason to be in a vehicle of this size or magnitude. But there have been a whole host of problems, and that's partially telling of what Volkswagen deals with versus what Mazda deals with. They stall. Stalling conditions is a big problem. Some of the engines have been problematic, securing clips, metal debris, coolant loss, leaks, or even blown head gaskets. There was even talk about shuffling heads because of fasteners to the heads weren't done up properly. Fuel leaks. And of course, we know not just the Atlas, but there was a problem as well for even their smaller SUVs that had fuel injector issues. So clearly a problem and a recall was associated as well with a 2024 due to a manufacturing issue and connecting rod. So the bottom end of the engine was known to potentially fail. Your rod bearings are the part that connects between your connecting rods and your crankshaft, your rotating mass. And if you have bad rod bearings, that's a catastrophic failure waiting to happen. And there's been a fair amount of these vehicles with those kind of problems. So if we're talking about electrical gremlins, that's one thing. There have been electrical faults, and many Volkswagens tend to have some of these electrical issues. But engine issues, transmission issues, physical body parts have all been known to fail. Another common issue with a lot of Volkswagens, some of their 2-liter turbo engines have had problems, heavy oil consumption, carbon fouling problems, turbos, of course even blown head gaskets because a water pump went and you didn't catch it quick enough and it warped the heads, and next thing you know you were rebuilding the top of the engine. That was a common problem, and people are getting used to changing water pumps as quick as 40, 50, 60,000 miles just to keep from out of having that problem. Some of the Mazdas have had some problems too. There's been troubles with battery draw on these. Lighting issues have been a big problem, specifically the 2016s. You're finding running lights having a big problem there. All kinds of power accessory problems, mirrors, lights. Some of the engines actually have had a problem with some oil consumption. And some argue that the 2.5 liter turbo Skyactiv G engine has known to use a little bit of oil. Now that being said, if you go with the naturally aspirated engine, they use a cylinder deactivation, which leads to its own problems. Just ask General Motors how that's working out for them with their 5.3s and broken rockers. The transmission as well on some of these Mazdas have been known to be a little lurchy, particularly between 3rd and 4th gear, a little hard shifting. But that being said, overall, not really a reliability issue, more of just a general ergonomic or concern on the drivability of the vehicle. Now, Mazdas, they've certainly been bringing up the quality of the overall fit and finish. And if you look at the lines and the detailing, every bit as good with a Mazda as you're finding on the Volkswagen. Now, if you go 10 to 15 years ago, Mazdas tend to rust out like there's no tomorrow. Look at some of the old Mazda 3s. They were just rusting. I mean, it wasn't uncommon to find rockers rusting out, or the rear quarter sections start to rot out, and a lot of the Mazdas from, like I said, 10 or 15 years ago. So some Mazdas are notorious for rust. A lot of Volkswagens tend to rust too. I've looked at the older Passats, Jettas, Golfs, many of those made in Mexico. I have an old 98 Volkswagen Cabrio, barely saw the light of day in the wintertime, but I'll be honest, it's rotting out. Almost the entire thing, the front fenders, the rocker panels, the rear quarters, everything's rusting out on it. And that was notorious back in those late 90s, early 2000s. But even the later generation cars, even from 07 to 012 and 014s, you're finding cars that just rusting out. So after 10 years, they're just not holding up. Which brand now in 2025 and 2026 is actually the more reliable brand? Well, let's start with Mazda, shall we, and some of the ratings. RepairPal gives Mazda about a 4 out of 5 star, which is a very high rating. RepairPal also ranks these Mazdas at about a 5 out of 32 out of all brands, and it only costs about $462 on average to service these vehicles. For the first 10, 15, 20 years, they're actually a very affordable car to keep going on the road. And as a matter of fact, you're only expecting 0.4 visits to the repair shop per year, with only about a 10% probability of it being a severe issue. Maybe every 2 to 3 years you might have an issue, and only 1 in 10 vehicles will suffer some major problem. And JD Power 2025 dependability study shows that a lot of these Mazdas now are good for a rating of only 161 problems per 100 vehicles. In other words, 1.6 problems per vehicle that you would expect, when the industry averages up around 202, and Lexus is down around 140 problems compared to the 160 here. And according to Consumers Reports, Mazda fares very well as well, with owner satisfaction ranking at about number 18, mainstream brand number 6. But would you believe it, Mazda's ranked number 6 for car reliability for brand new, and as good as number 3 when you're talking about the used car ranking. So Mazda has an extraordinarily high rating for overall reliability, and as you hit the used market and cars start showing some mileage and wear and tear, it appears that Mazda starts moving its way up the rank, while a lot of its competition starts falling off the backside of the honey wagon. And Volkswagen has had more than their share of troubles with the Tiguan and the Taos, with fuel system delivery issues, oil consumption, and a lot of quality control challenges in general. But many lovers of the Volkswagen brand would argue and say, look, as long as you keep throwing parts and money at it, it can be reliable. And that's kind of generally the German philosophy with a lot of the cars and the brands. If you put money into it constantly, it'll run, and it'll run reliably, but you have to be watching it. But Mazdas, you don't have to throw a lot of extra maintenance at it. That's the key there. Mazdas generally come with a durable little drivetrain. Most of them are naturally aspirated. Those that are turbos have proven themselves. This is one of the most reliable sports cars on the planet. The MX-5 Miata has been around forever and a day. Are they the fastest? No, but they're one of the most engaging cars. The MX-5 Skyactiv G, definitely a gorgeous little car. Because when we compare the rankings of all the big three as well, the Volkswagen doesn't do fares quite as well as the Mazda. Consumers Reports ranks at about 25 out of 100 in terms of overall brands, and the Tiguan here is not a particularly reliable model, but if you talk about the Teos, the smaller SUV, it's actually 18 out of 100. Absolutely abysmal, and a lot of it's because the quality problems, the fueling issues, the durability of the overall hardware, not to mention the infotainment, the electronics, and generally just not a vehicle that's been holding up all that well. Repair Pal doesn't throw so much stank at the brand, gives it a 3.5 out of 5 star, ranks at about 12th out of 32 car brands, and only says the average cost per year is about $676, but it's still a couple $100 more per year to keep the average Volkswagen on the road than the average Mazda. JD Power dependability study for 2025 also ranks these extremely poorly. As a matter of fact, they outdid the likes of Land Rover, Jaguar, Chrysler, Dodge, Fiat, all of them. Volkswagen ranked almost dead last in terms of the JD Power dependability study. Look, Volkswagen has not had that great of a record. That's an overall blended average. There's some models that are going to be terrible and other models that are going to be great. Some say the Jetta is one of the most reliable brands for Volkswagen, while any vehicle with the DSG and the maintenance costs associated with that are going to be a little higher. Of course, the diesels from a few years ago were reliable, even though the Dieselgate scandal took them down for a ride. And ultimately, it depends on the drivetrain as a big factor with Volkswagen and the overall dependability. Stick with a manual, you're good. Knowing that JD Power, Repair Pal, and Consumers Reports all look at these vehicles relatively independently and say, look, this vehicle here definitely is not going to last as long and likely won't get the miles out of it that a Mazda would. Now, which one would I buy? You have a CX-90 Mazda here, and this one's not perfect either. See, both brands have their issues. This is a plug-in hybrid, and this is one of the more problematic units. Now, this has an inline 6. This has been revised. This is a newer model, and of course a different drivetrain, different transmission, and it's a beautiful vehicle, but they've come with issues like it shuts off at the lights and then won't go back on. Unfortunately, this one, even though it's a gorgeous vehicle and certainly appeals to more of the luxury segment, it has had its share of issues. So what would I buy? Would it be a Mazda or would it be a Volkswagen? If I wanted a vehicle and I plan to keep it for 10 or 15 or 20 years, I'd buy a Mazda SUV, CX-50, Mazda 3, probably with even a manual gearbox. But if I wanted to have some fun, it would definitely be a Volkswagen Golf R. I'd probably get the GTI. They're way more engaging, and certainly Volkswagen has nicer technology and are farther advanced than Mazda. Mazda's a little bit old school, their displays are a little smaller, and their tech is a little bit unrefined. So durability, Mazda wins. Fun, the Volkswagen all the way. But if you enjoyed that, definitely check out right there the only Volkswagens I would actually buy today. Check it out, you're gonna love it. And if you want something more reliable, check that video, you're gonna love that as well. Hope to see each and every one of you all real soon, everybody. Bye-bye.